Have you ever wondered about the hidden layers of the lives around you? The secrets people keep, the untold stories buried beneath the surface of everyday existence? What if the person you thought you knew best, the one who was your anchor, your world, was living an entirely different life, shrouded in a darkness you couldn't possibly fathom? This is a story that begins where life often ends, at a funeral. But it's not the grief that will haunt you. It's the moment an uninvited guest steps into the quiet solemnity of loss, carrying a tiny, seemingly innocent object that shatters everything, revealing a truth so profound, so terrifying, it will make you question the very fabric of reality. Get ready, because the story you're about to hear is not just about a family's loss. It's about ancient secrets, a web of danger, and a legacy that transcends death itself. This is the tale of how one unexpected presence at a funeral changed absolutely everything. The air hung heavy, not just with the scent of lilies and stale grief, but with something else entirely, something acrid, almost metallic, like a secret struggling to escape. It was the kind of day that felt predestined, carved out of stone by an unseen hand, a day where every shadow seemed to stretch a little longer. Every whispered condolence carried an echo of something unspoken. This wasn't just any funeral. It was the final chapter of a story abruptly cut short, a life extinguished too soon, leaving behind a wake of questions and an emptiness that felt as vast as the ocean. Sarah, her eyes a raw, swollen crimson, clutched the arm of her eldest son, Michael, as if he were her only anchor in a world that had suddenly tilted on its axis. Her husband, Thomas, lay in the polished mahogany casket before them, a man who, just days ago, had been a vibrant force of nature, a laughter-filled presence, the very bedrock of their seemingly idyllic life. Now, he was a silent, immutable sculpture, a stark reminder of life's cruel fragility. The shock of his sudden passing, a catastrophic heart attack, the doctors had said, a bolt from the blue, still resonated through her like a continuous, low hum of disbelief. They had been married for 25 years, a quarter of a century woven with threads of shared dreams, whispered confessions under starlit skies, and the comforting rhythm of everyday existence. Their home, a charming colonial nestled in the leafy suburbs of Greenwich, Connecticut, had always been a sanctuary, filled with the cheerful chaos of their 3 children, Michael, Emily, and young Daniel, and the comforting aroma of Sarah's home-cooked meals. Thomas, a successful architect with a boyish grin and an infectious enthusiasm for life, had been the sun around which their universe revolved. His death had not just broken her heart. It had shattered the very firmament of her reality. The small, tastefully decorated funeral parlor was filled with faces both familiar and vaguely recognizable. Colleagues of Thomas from his firm, longtime friends from their university days, even a few distant relatives Sarah hadn't seen in years, all offered their solemn respects, their voices hushed, their expressions a mix of genuine sorrow and uncomfortable pity. Sarah nodded, murmured her thanks, her mind a numb fog, processing very little beyond the overwhelming desire for this agonizing ritual to simply end. She felt an eerie detachment, as if she were watching a play unfold, a grim, melancholic drama in which she was merely an unwilling participant. And then he appeared. He wasn't anyone Sarah recognized. He wasn't dressed in the somber black and gray that dominated the room. Instead, he wore a dark, impeccably tailored navy suit, a crisp white shirt, and a tie of deep burgundy. His presence, though not overtly disruptive, was undeniably striking. He was a man in his late 50s, perhaps early 60s, with a shock of silver hair that swept back from a distinguished forehead, and piercing, intelligent blue eyes that seemed to hold a vast, untold story. His face, though lined with age, bore an almost aristocratic quality, a quiet dignity that set him apart. He moved with a quiet confidence, his gaze sweeping over the assembled mourners, not with curiosity, but with an almost unsettling intensity, as if he were searching for something or someone. Sarah felt a prickle of unease. Who was this man? She had meticulously gone through Thomas's address book, his phone contacts, even his old university yearbooks, trying to ensure no one important was overlooked. Yet this man was a complete stranger. She nudged Michael, who was standing beside her, a pillar of strength despite his own evident grief. "Michael," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Do you know who that is?" Michael followed her gaze, his brow furrowing. He shook his head slowly. "No, Mom. Never seen him before. Maybe a client of Dad's that you didn't know." Sarah considered this, but dismissed it almost immediately. Thomas was meticulous about introducing her to his significant clients, often bringing them home for dinner. This man did not fit. The stranger didn't approach the family directly. Instead, he stood at the back of the room, near the large floral arrangement of white roses and lilies, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. He didn't offer condolences, didn't sign the guest book that lay open on a small table near the entrance. He simply stood, a silent, enigmatic figure, his gaze fixed on Thomas's open casket with an unwavering intensity that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. It wasn't a look of grief or even of sympathy. It was something deeper, more complex, an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Perhaps regret, perhaps even a flicker of something darker. As the eulogies began, first from Thomas's partner, a gruff but kind man named Arthur, then from a childhood friend who shared anecdotes of Thomas's mischievous youth, the stranger remained motionless. His eyes, those piercing blue eyes, seemed to absorb every word, every nuance, as if he were piecing together a puzzle or confirming a long-held suspicion. Sarah tried to dismiss him, to focus on the comforting words being spoken about her beloved husband, but her gaze kept drifting back to him, drawn by an inexplicable force. There was something about his stillness, his silent observation, that felt profoundly unsettling. After the official ceremony concluded, and the mourners began to mill about, offering their final respects before the procession to the cemetery, the stranger finally moved. He didn't walk towards the family. Instead, he approached the casket, slowly, deliberately. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. She watched, transfixed, as he stopped at the edge of the polished wood. For a long moment, he simply looked down at Thomas, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slow, almost theatrical movement, he reached into the inner pocket of his navy suit jacket. Sarah's heart pounded. What was he doing? Was he going to place a memento? A letter? He pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden bird, a robin, its breast painted a vibrant red, its tiny eyes almost lifelike. It was a beautiful, delicate piece, clearly handcrafted with immense care. Sarah's eyes widened. She knew that bird. Thomas had a similar one, a gift from his grandmother years ago, that sat on his desk in his home office, a cherished keepsake. But this one was identical, or so it seemed. The stranger gently placed the wooden bird on Thomas's chest, right over his folded hands. It was a gesture of profound intimacy, one that shook Sarah to her core. Who was this man, to possess such an identical item, and to place it with such reverence? A cold dread began to coil in her stomach, a feeling that went beyond grief. This was something else, something sinister. As he turned to leave, his eyes, for a fleeting moment, met Sarah's. There was no recognition, no apology, just that same unsettling intensity. A flicker of something passed between them, a silent, unsettling acknowledgement of a secret hovering just beneath the surface. He then turned and walked out of the funeral parlor, his footsteps silent, his departure as enigmatic as his arrival. The room, which moments before had felt suffocating with sorrow, now felt charged with a different kind of tension. Sarah looked at Michael, her unspoken question hanging in the air. Michael, equally perplexed, simply shook his head, his face pale. Emily, Thomas's artistic middle child, who had been quietly sobbing into a handkerchief, now looked up, her eyes wide with a sudden, dawning comprehension. "Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That bird. It's exactly like Dad's, isn't it?" Sarah could only nod, her mind reeling. The wooden bird, sitting innocently on Thomas's chest, was no longer just a beautiful trinket. It was a beacon, a signal, a key to a door she hadn't even known existed. The uninvited guest, with his piercing blue eyes and his silent, powerful gesture, had not come to mourn Thomas. He had come to deliver a message. And that message, she instinctively knew, would unravel everything she thought she knew about her husband and about her life. The grief she had felt moments before now morphed into a chilling apprehension. The funeral wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. And the secret he had brought, hidden within that small wooden bird, was about to change everything. The following days blurred into a haze of sorrow and unsettling revelations for Sarah. The wooden bird, now carefully removed from Thomas's casket and placed on her bedside table, seemed to hum with an unspoken energy, a constant, tangible reminder of the stranger and his baffling presence. Sarah couldn't shake the image of his piercing blue eyes, nor the unsettling intimacy of his gesture. It was as if he had deliberately left a breadcrumb trail, a cryptic clue meant only for her. She tried to talk to Michael about it again, but he was consumed by his own grief, burdened by the sudden responsibility of becoming the man of the house. Emily, always more perceptive, seemed to sense the underlying tension, watching her mother with an unusual quietness. Young Daniel, still too innocent to fully grasp the finality of death, wandered through the house with a confused, lost expression, frequently asking when Daddy would be home. The weight of her children's grief, combined with her own gnawing suspicion, was almost unbearable. Sarah found herself revisiting every memory of Thomas, every conversation, every shared laugh, trying to find a crack, a fissure, anything that might suggest a hidden life. But Thomas had always been an open book, or so she had believed. He was devoted to his family, meticulous in his work, and fiercely loyal to his friends. Their life had been one of comfortable routine, punctuated by family vacations, school events, and quiet evenings at home. Where could a secret of this magnitude possibly hide within such a seemingly transparent existence? Her first instinct was to investigate the wooden bird. She carefully examined it, turning it over in her hands. It was exquisitely crafted, each feather meticulously carved, the tiny eyes embedded with remarkable precision. She compared it to the one Thomas kept on his desk, the one his grandmother had given him. They were identical, down to the faintest imperfection in the paintwork of the red breast. How was this possible? Was it a mass-produced item? Unlikely, given the intricate handcraftsmanship. Was it a copy? If so, why? And who had given it to the stranger? A thought struck her. Thomas's grandmother, a formidable but loving woman named Eleanor, had passed away several years ago. Sarah remembered Thomas speaking fondly of her, often mentioning how Eleanor had encouraged his artistic inclinations as a child. He had even mentioned that Eleanor herself had been quite skilled at woodworking in her youth. Could Eleanor have made both? But why? And why would the stranger possess one? The gnawing feeling intensified. Sarah knew she had to find out who this man was. She recalled the brief, unsettling eye contact they had shared. There had been something in his gaze, a flicker of something she couldn't quite place, but it had felt like an invitation, a challenge. She racked her brain, trying to remember any detail, any distinguishing feature. His silver hair, those intelligent blue eyes, the expensive suit. Nothing specific enough to go on. Then, a small detail resurfaced from the fog of her memory. As he had turned to leave, just before he stepped out of the funeral parlor, his sleeve had ridden up slightly, revealing a flash of something on his wrist. It had been quick, just a glimpse, but Sarah's mind, heightened by grief and suspicion, had registered it. A small, circular tattoo, just below his left cuff. It wasn't a common design. It was a stylized compass rose, but instead of the usual cardinal directions, it had four intricate, almost calligraphic symbols at each point. She didn't know what they meant, but she knew she wouldn't forget them. This was her first real lead. The next few days were a blur of furtive research. While the children were at school, Sarah spent hours online, searching for tattoo parlors that specialized in unusual or custom designs, scouring forums dedicated to symbolism, even venturing onto darker corners of the internet where private investigators advertised their services. She felt a profound sense of guilt, digging into Thomas's past, but the unsettling image of the stranger and the wooden bird had taken root, poisoning her grief with a creeping sense of betrayal. Her search proved largely fruitless until one evening, while casually flipping through an old photography book Thomas had kept in his study, she saw it. A picture of an ancient Celtic cross, its intricate carvings adorned with symbols eerily similar to the ones on the stranger's compass rose tattoo. The book was a collection of photographs from ancient archaeological sites in Ireland. Thomas had always been fascinated by Celtic history and mythology, a fact Sarah had always found charmingly quaint. Now it felt like a chilling breadcrumb. The book contained a small, almost imperceptible inscription on the inside cover, written in elegant looping script, "To Thomas, my enduring star. Always, Aidan." Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. Aidan. Was this the stranger's name? And enduring star? The phrase sent a shiver down her spine. It was too intimate, too poetic for a casual acquaintance, let alone a client. Could this Aidan be more than just a friend? A cold, sickening possibility began to form in her mind, one that made her stomach clench. She searched for Aidan and Celtic tattoo online, adding Greenwich to narrow the search. The results were overwhelming, a dizzying array of names and images. But then, a name popped up that made her freeze. Aidan Fitzpatrick, a prominent art restorer and collector, known for his expertise in ancient artifacts, particularly those of Celtic origin. The description included a detail that made Sarah's blood run cold. Aidan Fitzpatrick, a reclusive man, rarely seen in public, who had recently returned to the United States after spending decades abroad, primarily in Ireland. He lived in a quiet, sprawling estate not far from Greenwich, a detail she had vaguely heard mentioned by local gossips but never paid attention to. The article also mentioned his distinctive silver hair and piercing blue eyes. It was him. It had to be. The revelation sent a wave of nausea through Sarah. An art restorer? Collector of ancient artifacts? Why would he have such a connection to Thomas, a successful architect? The pieces didn't fit, not in any conventional sense. But the feeling of dread, the icy grip of premonition, told her there was nothing conventional about this. That night, sleep eluded her. Every shadow in the room seemed to hold a secret. Every creak of the old house sounded like a whispered confession. She remembered a conversation, years ago, when Thomas had briefly mentioned a dark period in his youth, something he never elaborated on, simply dismissing it as boyish stupidity. She had never pressed him, respecting his privacy, assuming it was just some youthful indiscretion. Now that vague memory loomed large, taking on a sinister new meaning. The next morning, driven by an unshakable compulsion, Sarah decided she needed to visit Aidan Fitzpatrick. She knew it was reckless, perhaps even dangerous, but the need for answers was a burning inferno within her. She couldn't mourn Thomas properly until she understood this unsettling mystery. She wrote a quick note for Michael, telling him she had an urgent errand, and left the children with her trusted neighbor. As she drove towards the address listed for Aidan Fitzpatrick's estate, her hands trembled on the steering wheel. The drive took her through increasingly secluded roads, winding past ancient stone walls and dense forests, until she reached a set of imposing wrought iron gates. Beyond them, a long, winding driveway disappeared into a thick canopy of old-growth trees. A small, discreet plaque on the gate post read, "Fitzpatrick Estate, Private Property." Sarah hesitated, her heart hammering against her ribs. What if he refused to see her? What if he was hostile? What if he knew something truly terrible? The thought of turning back crossed her mind, but the image of Thomas's silent face in the casket, the small wooden bird resting on his chest, pushed her forward. She pressed the intercom button. A moment of silence, then a low, resonant voice answered. Yes, it was him. The voice was unmistakable, calm, deep with a subtle, almost imperceptible lilt that spoke of a life lived far from the conventional. "Mr. Fitzpatrick," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly despite herself. "My name is Sarah Miller. I was at Thomas Miller's funeral yesterday." Another pause, longer this time. The silence stretched, pregnant with unspoken meaning. Sarah felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. She almost expected him to hang up, to dismiss her. Then his voice, softer now, but still with that underlying resonance. "Ah, Mrs. Miller, I was wondering if you would make the connection. Please come in. The gates will open for you." The click of the lock reverberated through the quiet morning air. The heavy gates slowly swung inward, revealing the winding path ahead. Sarah took a deep, shaky breath, shifted the car into drive, and slowly entered the unknown. She knew, with a terrifying certainty, that she was about to step into a past that Thomas had desperately tried to bury, a past that held secrets far darker and more profound than she could ever imagine. The truth, she suspected, would not just change her understanding of Thomas. It would shatter it, and she was about to come face to face with the man who held the key to it all. The winding driveway to Aidan Fitzpatrick's estate felt endless, each turn pulling Sarah deeper into a sense of dread and anticipation. The house itself was a sprawling, stone mansion, half hidden by ancient trees, its architecture hinting at centuries of quiet history. It was imposing, almost foreboding, a place where secrets could easily be kept, buried beneath layers of ivy and time. Aidan Fitzpatrick was waiting for her on the expansive front porch, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He was even more striking up close, his blue eyes holding a depth that felt both ancient and profoundly sad. He motioned her inside with a graceful sweep of his hand. "Welcome, Mrs. Miller. Or should I call you Sarah?" His voice was as she remembered, resonant and calm. Yet now there was an undercurrent of something else, a quiet challenge, an unspoken invitation to a truth she might not be ready for. The interior of the house was a labyrinth of dimly lit rooms, filled with an eclectic collection of art and artifacts. Ancient tapestries hung on the walls, their colors muted by time. Intricately carved wooden statues stood sentinel in shadowy corners. The air was thick with the scent of old paper, polished wood, and something indefinable, almost mystical. It was the home of a man who lived with history, a man who understood the weight of forgotten things. He led her to a study, a cavernous room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, overflowing with tomes on history, mythology, and obscure folklore. A large, worn leather armchair sat opposite a grand fireplace, where embers glowed faintly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. He gestured for her to sit, and she sank into the embrace of the soft leather, feeling oddly vulnerable. He took the chair opposite her, his gaze unwavering. "You came for answers, Sarah," he began, his voice low, "and I believe you deserve them. But know this, some truths are harder to bear than others. What I am about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about your husband, Thomas." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. "I understand. Just, please tell me, who are you? And what was your connection to Thomas?" "The bird, I saw it. It's identical to the one his grandmother gave him." Aidan's eyes softened, a flicker of genuine sorrow passing through them. "The bird, yes, that was a symbol, a message between us. A memento of a past that Thomas tried desperately to leave behind. My name, as you may have discovered, is Aidan Fitzpatrick. And Thomas and I were more than just friends. We were brothers, Sarah. Not by blood, but by a bond forged in fire, in secrets, and in a shared past that haunted us both." Sarah gasped, a choked sound escaping her lips. Brothers? Thomas had never mentioned a brother. Not once. Her mind reeled, trying to reconcile this astonishing claim with the man she had loved and lived with for a quarter of a century. Brothers? What are you talking about? Thomas was an only child. Aidan sighed, a deep, weary sound. That is what he wanted you to believe. And in a way he was. Our brotherhood was of a different kind. You see, Thomas and I grew up together, not in a conventional family, but in a world that few people ever glimpse. A world of shadows, of ancient rituals, of secrets passed down through generations. He paused, his gaze fixed on the dying embers in the fireplace. Our mothers were part of an ancient order, Sarah, a clandestine society known only to a select few. They were protectors of certain artifacts, objects of immense power, tied to the very fabric of history and the unseen forces that shape our world. Thomas and I were raised within this order, trained from a young age to understand and, if necessary, defend these relics. Sarah stared at him, her mind struggling to process the fantastical narrative. Ancient order? Relics of immense power? It sounded like something out of a pulp novel, not the life of her practical, grounded husband. Yet, the conviction in Aiden's voice, the raw emotion in his eyes, was undeniable. Thomas, he was exceptional, Aiden continued, a note of wistfulness in his voice. Brilliant, resourceful, fiercely independent. But he grew tired of the shadows. He longed for a normal life, a life free from the burden of our past, from the constant vigilance and the ever-present danger. He met you, Sarah, and he saw a way out. He fell deeply in love with you, and he made a choice. He chose to leave the order, to sever all ties, to build a new life with you, a life of normalcy and light. He told me he had a dark period in his youth, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. He never elaborated. That dark period was his life within the order, Aiden said, his voice grim. Leaving us was not easy. The order does not simply let people walk away. There are consequences. But Thomas, with his incredible will, found a way. He made a deal, a sacrifice of sorts, to ensure your safety and the safety of your future children. He swore an oath, a sacred vow, never to speak of us, never to return, and never to use the knowledge he had gained for personal gain. In exchange, the order would leave him and you in peace. And the bird? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Why the bird? The wooden robin was a symbol of our mother's lineage within the order, Aiden explained. A discreet mark, a way for those who knew to recognize one another. His grandmother, Eleanor, was one of the most revered members of our order. She made 2 of those birds, identical in every way. One for Thomas, her heir in spirit, and one for me, her adopted charge. It was her way of reminding us, even as we ventured into different lives, that our bond and our heritage would always remain. A knot of ice formed in Sarah's stomach. Eleanor, her kind, eccentric grandmother-in-law, a secret keeper of ancient relics? It was almost too much to bear. So why now? Sarah pressed, her voice rising slightly. Why did you come to his funeral? After all these years? Aiden's expression darkened, a profound sadness settling over his features. Because the terms of Thomas's agreement have been broken, Sarah. Not by him, not intentionally, but by circumstances beyond his control. The order, it is in turmoil. A faction has risen, seeking to exploit the relics for their own twisted purposes. They are ruthless, and they believe Thomas held a key, a piece of information, or perhaps even an artifact that would aid them in their quest. What kind of key? What kind of artifact? Sarah demanded, her heart pounding. Thomas was exceptionally skilled at deciphering ancient codes and puzzles. Aiden explained, his voice grave. He had a unique mind, a gift for seeing patterns where others saw chaos. There is an ancient map, known as the Sunken Star Chart, that leads to a hidden chamber, a vault of immense power. It is said to contain the heart of Ethelred, a relic of unparalleled energy. Only Thomas had the knowledge to fully unlock its secrets. But he was an architect, Sarah cried, the absurdity of it all crashing over her. Not a treasure hunter. His architectural mind, his understanding of structures and hidden spaces, was precisely what made him so valuable to the order. Aiden countered, his gaze firm. He could see the ancient designs, the intricate traps, the hidden passages that others would overlook. And he had a photographic memory. He memorized the critical portions of the Sunken Star Chart years ago before he left. The rogue faction, they believe he transferred that knowledge or a fragment of the map itself into something mundane, something hidden in plain sight in his new life. Something they need. The implication hung heavy in the air, a terrifying realization. They believed Thomas had left them a clue, a final puzzle, and she, Sarah, was now caught in the crosshairs. They believe his death was natural, a coincidence, Aiden continued, his voice barely a whisper. But I have reason to suspect otherwise. Thomas was careful, meticulous. His heart condition, while present, was stable. I believe they may have had a hand in it. They were desperate. They needed what Thomas knew. And they found a way to accelerate his passing, hoping that whatever he left behind would be revealed in the aftermath of his death. Sarah felt a scream building in her throat, a wave of raw, horrifying grief threatening to consume her. Thomas hadn't just died. He had been murdered, a pawn in a game she couldn't even begin to comprehend. Her world, which had already shattered, now fragmented into a million terrifying pieces. "They are watching, Sarah," Aiden said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "They will come for whatever Thomas left behind, and they will assume you know where it is, or that you are unknowingly in possession of it. You are in grave danger." He leaned forward, his blue eyes intense, filled with a desperate urgency. "You must help me, Sarah. For your sake, for your children's sake. We must find whatever Thomas hid. Before they do." The weight of his words pressed down on her, suffocating her with their impossible implications. Her husband, a secret guardian of ancient power, murdered by a shadowy organization, leaving her and her children vulnerable. The comfortable, ordinary life she had built, revealed to be a fragile illusion. The uninvited guest had not just come to deliver a message. He had come to ignite a war she now found herself inextricably caught in, a war for secrets, for power, and for the very safety of her family. And the truth, now fully unveiled, was far more terrifying than any mystery she could have imagined. The silence in Aiden's study stretched, thick with the weight of his revelations. Sarah felt as though the very air had been sucked out of her lungs, leaving her gasping for breath in a world that had suddenly become a terrifying, unrecognizable place. Thomas, her Thomas, a man who had secretly been a guardian of ancient relics, murdered by a clandestine organization. The sheer audacity of it, the betrayal of her entire understanding of her life, was almost too much to bear. "My children," Sarah whispered, her voice barely a thread. "They're in danger. All this time I thought we were safe." Aiden's expression was grim. "You were safe, Sarah, because Thomas was a master of his craft. He buried his past so deeply that even we, who knew him best, struggled to find a trace. But with his death, the carefully constructed edifice he built has begun to crumble. The rogue faction, led by a man named Elias Thorne, is relentless. Thorne believes that with the heart of Ethelred, he can reshape the world, bending history and destiny to his will. He will stop at nothing. So what do we do?" Sarah asked, a flicker of defiance igniting amidst her terror. The grief that had paralyzed her was now transmuted into a fierce, protective rage. She would not let Thomas's sacrifice be in vain. She would not let her children become pawns in this dark game. "We find what Thomas hid," Aiden said, his gaze steady. "He was far too clever to leave it in plain sight, and far too devoted to you to risk your safety directly. He would have encoded it, woven it into something seemingly innocuous, something only he, or someone who knew him intimately, could decipher. We must retrace his steps, revisit his passions, and find the clues he left behind." He stood and walked over to a large, antique globe, spinning it slowly. Thomas had a particular fondness for codes and puzzles, as I mentioned. He loved riddles, wordplay, and esoteric symbols. Think about his hobbies, his interests, anything that was uniquely Thomas. He often wove personal meaning into his work, his designs, even his casual conversations. Sarah racked her brain, picturing Thomas in their home, absorbed in his various pursuits. His love for old maps, his collection of rare books, the intricate wooden puzzles he sometimes crafted in his workshop, his fascination with constellations and celestial navigation. "His maps," she said, almost to herself. He had an old collection of maps from all over the world. Some were incredibly detailed, hand-drawn. Aiden turned, his eyes lighting up. Maps, of course. Thomas's brilliance lay in seeing the hidden patterns in the world. A map, particularly an old, intricately detailed one, would be a perfect place for him to hide something. A symbol, a marking, a slight alteration that only someone with his specific knowledge could spot. He also loved astronomy, Sarah added, a distant memory resurfacing. He used to spend hours in his study, looking at old star charts. He even had a telescope, said it helped him feel connected to something larger than himself. Aidan nodded slowly, his lips curving into a faint, knowing smile. The sunken star chart. It speaks of celestial alignments, of the movement of the stars. Thomas always found comfort in the order of the cosmos, a stark contrast to the chaos of our former life. It's likely he integrated his knowledge of the map with his love for astronomy. They spent the next few hours meticulously sifting through Thomas's study, a room Sarah had always viewed as a sanctuary of quiet work, now transformed into a potential battleground. They examined every book, every blueprint, every piece of art. Aidan, with his deep knowledge of ancient symbols and clandestine methods, pointed out subtle markings Sarah would have otherwise missed. A barely visible symbol etched into the spine of a book on Celtic mythology, a strange sequence of numbers hidden in the architectural plans for a library he had designed, a faint watermark on an old astronomical chart that seemed to depict a constellation Sarah had never seen before. As they worked, a strange, uneasy partnership formed between them. Aidan was a ghost from Thomas's past, a living embodiment of the secrets that had shattered her world. Yet, he was also her only guide, her only hope of navigating this treacherous new reality. He spoke of Thomas with a reverence and affection that made Sarah realize the depth of their shared bond, a bond forged in a crucible of shared danger and ancient lineage. She saw glimpses of the young Thomas, the one who longed for freedom, in Aidan's recollections, adding another layer of complexity to the man she thought she knew. By late afternoon, they had gathered a small collection of items: the old Celtic mythology book, the architectural blueprints, the peculiar astronomical chart, and a worn leather-bound journal Thomas had kept, filled with cryptic notes and sketches. It was a language Sarah couldn't understand, but Aidan's eyes gleamed with a familiar recognition. "This is it," Aidan said, his voice filled with a quiet triumph. "This is Thomas's final puzzle." He didn't just hide a single item. He created a trail, a series of clues designed to be found only by someone with a deep understanding of his mind, someone who could see the connections between seemingly disparate things. He pointed to a sketch in the journal, a stylized drawing of the wooden robin, but with a subtle difference. Its eye was replaced by a tiny, intricate spiral. This spiral, it's a specific Celtic symbol for eternity and rebirth, and this drawing is clearly meant to be an instruction. Sarah looked at the wooden bird on her bedside table, a cold realization dawning on her. She had been holding the first clue all along, the very object that had triggered this terrifying journey. Aidan took the wooden robin, his fingers tracing the tiny, etched spiral. He pressed down gently, and with a soft click, a minuscule compartment sprang open on the bird's underside, too small to be noticed by the casual observer. Inside, nestled on a velvet lining, was a tiny, rolled-up parchment. With trembling hands, Aidan unrolled the parchment. It was a fragment of a map, drawn in an ancient script Sarah couldn't read, but interwoven with mathematical equations and astronomical calculations. At the very bottom, in Thomas's familiar handwriting, was a single line of English. "The heart lies where the ancient stars align with the silent protectors." Aidan's eyes widened. The silent protectors, the standing stones, the ancient megaliths scattered across Ireland, each a marker of powerful ley lines. Thomas knew this. He must have encoded the precise location of the heart of Ethelred within these coordinates, disguised by the astronomical data. He always had a flair for the dramatic. The revelation was staggering. The heart of Ethelred wasn't just a legend. It was real, and Thomas had known how to find it. And now they had the first piece of the puzzle. But the danger was far from over. "They will be looking for this, Sarah," Aidan said, carefully re-rolling the parchment. "Thorn will stop at nothing to get his hands on it. We must move quickly, and we must be careful. Your life, and the lives of your children, depend on it." Sarah looked at the tiny parchment, then at Aiden, a man who had walked out of her husband's secret past and into her fractured present. The grief for Thomas was still raw, but now it was tinged with a new understanding, a profound respect for the man he had truly been, a silent protector, a guardian of secrets, willing to sacrifice everything to keep his family safe. He had left her a final, desperate legacy, a perilous quest to protect what he had held dear. The journey ahead was daunting, fraught with unknown dangers. But as Sarah looked at the determined glint in Aiden's eyes and felt the fierce resolve growing within her own heart, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not back down. Thomas had given his life for this, and she would honor his sacrifice. The uninvited guest had opened a door to a terrifying new world, but within that terror, she found a strength she never knew she possessed. The game had begun, and she was ready to play. And so, the journey begins for Sarah, thrust into a world she never knew existed, forced to confront the hidden life of the man she loved. The uninvited guest, Aiden Fitzpatrick, brought not just a cryptic clue, but a terrifying reality, a game of shadows, power, and ancient secrets that now threatens everything she holds dear. What will Sarah discover as she delves deeper into Thomas's past? Will she unravel the full truth of the sunken star chart and the heart of Ethelred, or will the rogue faction of the Order find them first? The stakes couldn't be higher. This is just the beginning of a perilous quest, where every step reveals a new danger, and every answer only leads to more questions. If this story has gripped you, if it's made you question what truly lies beneath the surface, then don't miss a single chapter of this unfolding drama. Make sure to like this video right now, subscribe to the channel for more gripping tales, and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when the next part of this incredible story drops. Your support helps us bring more hidden truths to light.